Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to introduce everybody to the new Decision Lens Impact Dashboard. Before we get going, I have a couple of housekeeping items that I just want to go over. We're going to try to keep this to about 45 minutes long, have some live demonstration in here. The webcast is being recorded, and so we're going to go ahead and send everyone the recording as well as the slides. In addition to that, we're also going to send you a link to our community. It's community.decisionlens.com, but we'll include a specific link in there for any questions that you may have. You can interact with us as well as interact with each other and start asking kind of questions about how folks are using the Impact Dashboard and things like that. Today, we're going to be, you're going to hear from two of us. First is Caitlin Young. She's a product manager here at Decision Lens. Caitlin and our development team are really the driving force behind all the features that you're going to see inside the Impact Dashboard. I really want to congratulate her and our development team for continually improving and creating great new features for everyone. She's going to run us through some live demonstrations of the Impact Dashboard so you can see that and how it's going to help you in your organization. My name is Michael Rahm. I'm going to be your MC today. I'm going to walk you through some of the features and then really go into how the dashboard is going to help and hopefully improve your portfolio process. So really the goal of the Impact Dashboard is to provide executive decision makers a more holistic view of the relationships between changes in allocation from one investment category to another, and then really see what those impacts are going to be on different KPIs and metrics that you have. We've been working on this for quite a while. We started off with a lot of our DOT customers. There's legislation that was enacted, the FAST Act and MAP 21. I won't get too detailed into that, but a lot of performance management requirements and reporting requirements around funding and things like that were introduced. Now, not to just say that DOTs are the only ones that can use this, and we're seeing a lot of great use cases across industries for the Impact Dashboard. So, whether you're calling it performance management or cross-asset optimization, cross-portfolio optimization, this is going to be extremely important across all the different industries. Looking at a single portfolio of projects and investments is great, but it's really now is the time to start looking at how all of those different portfolios interact with one another so that you can get an even better picture of your organization and make sure that the investments are aligned with your strategic initiatives. So I'll do a brief overview of the dashboard. I want to talk about some of the different dashboard components and then the analysis modes that make up the dashboard. So like I said, the Impact Dashboard is really, it's going to help you determine the trade-offs needed to reach your desired portfolio outcomes. We all know that a lot of times we have to make compromises in the projects and investments that we make. In a perfect world, we'd have unlimited money and we'd be able to get the best scores on all our metrics and KPIs. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And so organizations really need the ability to look at how investments in one portfolio are going to affect the others and see, kind of where you're going to land and make sure that you've got the right scenarios, the right funding mix of projects and things like that across the board in order to reach your strategic initiatives. Just like any other dashboard that you use, this dashboard is really going to offer you quick, at-a-glance information about your investments. We don't want people to have to hunt for that needle in the haystack insight. We want to bring those to the forefront, for you, so that you can see how your KPIs and metrics from one portfolio to another are impacted, and then use that to make sure you're hitting your strategic goals. So this is definitely not a static dashboard. We offer great dynamic data capabilities and provide really actionable insights for you. You're really able to interact with your data across all of the different portfolios and scenarios that you're including, see those required trade-offs to hit your performance goals, and then view those outcomes based on the resource changes from one portfolio to another, and then make sure that you're optimized on those. So to run a few of the components, just as a brief kind of primer for the dashboard, you must be a portfolio owner or reviewer to create a dashboard. All the creation happens right there on your front Decision Lens homepage, and those dashboards will now be displayed in their own separate section when you log in, so that you have quick access to them. Starting off with the portfolio budget information, this is a great aggregation of kind of all of the budget data from all of the portfolios that you decide to bring in to the dashboard. So you've got your total starting budget, gives you that big round number. So in this case, we've got 13.4 million, and our allocated total. So that's going to be all the funded alternatives within each scenario. What does that add up to? And then the underbuy, overbuy. This is a great visual cue to see kind of where you're at with your allocations via the portfolio sliders that you're making. You can see here that we're underbuy, it's 5,600, so we're in the green. But if you start to go over that number, that'll actually turn red. And so it'll immediately let you know that you're already over your budget. What are the trade-offs that you need to make maybe to get under that number? And then you've got the allocation charts here. I really like these two because, again, they're great visual indicators. You know, a lot of times when you have executives and stuff, you can log into this. You'll see, you know, specifically on the portfolio allocation chart on the left-hand side, you've got this blue section, this portfolio. It's got more than 50% of our total allocation. You know, it's a good indication, or it's a good indicator of maybe, is it a question that I should ask? Do we have too much money being allocated to the specific portfolio, or why do we have so much money allocated to this portfolio and not the others? And then on the right-hand side, that bar chart there, the funding as percentage of request chart, it'll show you the actual percentage of funded projects each portfolio received. So again, that bottom bar, we've got almost 100% of the projects in that portfolio funded. You know, maybe I need to ask myself, is that the right mix of projects? Do I need to go ahead and look at the other project portfolios to see, you know, do I need to increase more spend in one of those? Just to make sure that, again, I'm aligning with my strategic initiatives and making sure that we've got the right investments and projects. So onto the metrics. This is really the meat of the impact dashboard. I'm able to go in and make changes and watch in real time what the impact is, not only to metrics in the portfolio that I'm changing, but depending on the analysis mode, which we'll get into a little bit later, to see how those changes in one portfolio make impacts to my metrics in my other portfolios. During your dashboard setup, you'll be able to display, select the metrics that you want to look at. We can do things like change different thresholds, and you can adjust that to whatever kind of your organization's definition of, you know, maybe good and bad. You can go in there and create that. And then you can also combine similar metrics across, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later. And then we've got a more detailed view. This is actually kind of my favorite part of the dashboard. You can easily see things like, you know, diminishing return. You know, for example, on the bottom, the cost savings, you can see, you know, as I spend more money and I go to the right, it looks like I'm really only getting kind of that same $1.23 million in cost savings. So I can ask myself, you know, do we really want to spend more money, or am I happy with a point further to the middle, or maybe to a little bit more to the left? And then you're able to easily kind of spot some outliers too. You can see on this projected revenue total metric on the top, you know, I really have poor performance all the way over until I've spent about $8 million, and all of a sudden my revenue, my projected revenue jumps up to right around $2 million. So being able to easily spot those outliers, you know, is great. Maybe something that you wouldn't be able to see just with looking at the dial or something like that. Just to give you a little bit of behind the scenes on kind of how all of this is calculated, we actually run a Pareto simulation in 1% increments for each portfolio to show funding all the way from 0 to 200. So we're giving you a lot of different data points to ensure that you've got a lot of different things to look at and make sure, again, that we're giving you better insights, more depth into the analytics. So with that, I want to pass it over to Caitlin, and I will let her do a demo.
Thank you, Michael. So as you mentioned, with the impact dashboard, you are now able to view the impacts of resourcing decisions on key measures across multiple portfolios. And this is really the first time where we're able to look at the data across multiple portfolios in one location. And this is going to help us answer questions such as, how much money would I need or how much money would I need to have to reach a particular performance target? Or what would be the impact if I moved money from one portfolio to another portfolio? And then lastly, how can I get the optimal mix of performance across key metrics across multiple portfolios if I were to move money around? And so now I'm going to jump into Decision Lens and actually show you how to create a dashboard and then walk through those components of the dashboard that Michael just briefly went over. So the first thing in creating a dashboard is you must be a portfolio owner or reviewer. And if you are, you now have a new Create Dashboard button that lives right under Create Portfolio. And you'll notice that once you create a few dashboards, you get a new dashboard section on your homepage in Decision Lens. And this is similar to the task section as well as portfolio section. And this is where you will access your dashboards in the future once you create them. So to create your dashboard, the first step is to give it a name. So I'm going to call it My New Dashboard. You can also give it a description if you want, so maybe provide a little bit more detail about what the dashboard is accomplishing. And then when you create the dashboard, this is going to direct you to the setup page. And this is where you will get to actually configure what will be viewed on your dashboard. There are two main things that go into creating a dashboard and two main things that you need. The first is metric data. So again, these dashboards, they're really revolving around metrics and ensuring that you're getting the key metrics that you need for each portfolio. So you will need to have metric data entered within your portfolio for your projects. And then the second piece of information that you would need is your funding information. So if you're going to achieve certain metric values, how are you going to get there? What money are you using to fund them? So the first step of setup is to actually select your metrics. You can see by default we're listing all of the metrics across all of the portfolios that you're an owner or a reviewer in. If you know the metrics you want to select, we do have a search up here, so you would be able to search for specific metrics. And then you can also filter by portfolio. So if I know I'm looking for specific metrics by portfolio, I can use these as a filter and select the metrics that I want to view on my dashboard. You'll notice as I'm selecting the metrics, they're populating in the far right column. And this is just, again, a summary to show me what will be going on to my dashboard. So now that I've selected my metrics, I get to the last step of setting up my dashboard. The first part of this is to go back to that funding piece and specify what money we're actually going to use to achieve these metrics. And so you can see you have a scenario drop down here, and this is where you get to specify which scenario you would want to use for each portfolio. And you can change these. It's going to default to your last use scenario, but if you want to use a different one, you can, of course, change that. And then the very last step in setting up your dashboard is to select how you want to aggregate each of the metrics. So we've selected the metrics, and now we have to select, when I'm looking at that metric value, how do I want that to be aggregated? Do I want to look at the sum metric? Do I want to look at the minimum metric value, the maximum metric value, or do I want to look at the average? I know for these metrics, I want to keep it at the sum and look at that total. So for example, projected revenue, I would really want to look at one lump sum of projected revenue across all of the projects that I would be funding. And then the very last part of setting up your dashboard is, of course, to save it and to generate it. And once I click this Save button, I'm going to be directed to the dashboard generation. And this is when the dashboard is actually being created. And what is going on during this step is we are actually running all of the calculations up front, so that you're able to perform those trade-offs and get the answers instantaneously. So the calculations we're running are around Pareto analysis. And as Michael mentioned, we're running a Pareto simulation in 1% increments to obtain those budget points between 0 and 200% of each portfolio's overall budget. And again, that's going to really get us that fine level of granularity so that we can see at each level of allocation how that's going to impact our metrics. And again, that's going to get us the data instantaneously because we are running the results during that step. Once the generation is done, you'll see I'm automatically directed to my new dashboard. And as Michael walked you through all of the components, I'm going to do that now live. And you can see the first part of the dashboard is the overall budget information. And so again, this represents the budget information across all of the portfolios that we selected during the setup process. The first number represents the starting budget. So how much money do we have across all of the portfolios in our dashboard? The second number is the allocated total. So how much money are we actually spending on our projects across these portfolios? And then the last number is the underbuy or overbuy number, and this represents the difference between these two numbers. And this is where it's showing you, are you under your initial starting budget or are you over that? And if you know that you can't exceed a certain amount of budget, this is a great indication and way to kind of see, are you over your budget and by too much? So the next part of the dashboard are the two charts that Michael went over. The first is the portfolio summary chart. This is a visual representation of the allocated total up here, and it's showing you where you're spending your money across your portfolio. So I can see here, for this particular portfolio, I'm allocating, a good majority of my overall budget, and that might be okay, but again, it's just a great way to kind of keep tabs on where your money's going. The second chart to the right is the percent of requests that are funded chart, and this is showing you for each portfolio, based on the amount of money that you requested across all of your projects, how much are you actually funding? And so when you hover over each bar, it's going to give you more information. So I can see for this particular portfolio, I initially asked for about $8.5 million, and I'm funding about 77% of that. So this, again, is a great way to kind of understand how much did you initially request from all of your projects, and then how much are you funding. So the next part of the dashboard, this is when we get into the allocation information. And so these sliders that you see here, these represent the allocation data for each of the portfolios on your dashboard. And the number that you're seeing on each slider, this is how much money you are initially allocating to each portfolio from the start. So when your dashboard's originally generated, we're optimizing, we're running that Pareto analysis, and this is how much money we are initially allocating to our projects. So I can see I'm allocating $6.5 million, and this is where I would get to start to perform those trade-offs and start to say, if I wanted to spend less money, how is that going to impact the metrics within that portfolio? And ultimately, how is that going to impact my overall budget? The final section of the dashboard is the metrics section. And this, of course, is a large section. You can see that all of the metrics are organized by portfolio and they're color-coded. So it's really easy to see which metrics belong to what portfolio and then tie that back to the allocation information. Each metric tile will have the name at the top, again, show you which portfolio it belongs to. And then the value that you're seeing here is based upon the aggregation function that we specified during setup. So if you remember, for projected revenue, we said we wanted to sum all of the values and look at that one lump sum of projected revenue across all of our projects, and that's what this number is representing. The next part of the metric tile are these threshold colors. So we have this green, yellow, and red, and we are able to edit these, as Michael mentioned during the beginning. And what this allows us to do is if for particular metrics we know there are ranges that are maybe seen as not very good, cautionary, or good and desired, we can set those here. By default, we're automatically breaking each metric into thirds, and you can edit this. So for example, for projected revenue, if I know that once I hit $1 million, that's really good, I can call that out here, and you'll see this update as well. Once I save these changes, you'll notice they update on the tile. And the other thing that you can do with the thresholds is for a metric, if you know a lower number is going to be better than a higher number, you can also change the order of the colors. So for vulnerabilities, I want fewer vulnerabilities across my project. So I'm going to actually make the green be on the left side. And so as I get higher in my numbers, I'm going to start to get in that undesired area. And so once I save that, again, it's going to be applied, and I can see the changes immediately. And then the very last part of the metrics section is the detailed view that Michael went into. And this is a great view. It's really a visual representation of the budget points that we are running and generating during the dashboard generation. And this makes it really easy to kind of see, based on the amount of money you're spending, what metric values are you going to obtain. And so for this example, I can see even though I'm increasing my spend, so as I move my cursor, you can see I'm spending more and more money, increasing the spend, but unless I spend about $7.5 million, I'm not actually going to get into that desired green area for this metric. And then for this example down here, this is kind of the plateau example. So again, as Michael mentioned, as you increase your spend for cost savings, so you're spending more money to hopefully get you a higher cost savings, it's actually not doing that. And you're kind of plateauing. And so even though you're increasing your money, you're staying around that same 1.21 million in cost savings. And so again, this just really makes it easy to kind of see where all those budget points are and you know, what you need from funding to get the desired performance metrics. And so with that, Michael, I'm going to pass it back to you, and I think you're going to walk us through the different modes of analysis for the dashboard.
Great. All right. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so like Caitlin mentioned, we do have a couple different analysis modes. What Caitlin was just showing you there is the default mode. That's our basic mode. That's, you know, budgets for any or all your portfolios can grow and shrink without limitations. A key thing to make sure that you understand is that changing allocations of one portfolio in the basic mode is not going to have any impact on any of the other portfolios. It's only going to impact the metrics in that specific portfolio. So if you change the budget slider on the left-hand side for a portfolio, it'll only change the 1, 2, 3, however many metrics that you have for that on the right-hand side in the metric. On the advanced side, however, that overall budget is fixed, and this is kind of where we get into our real-world scenarios, making sure that we hit performance targets and things like that. This is where you're going to start seeing changes in allocation in one portfolio are going to start moving the dials for those other portfolios. So you can start to kind of see how the impacts really from one portfolio are trickling down through the others, whether those be positive or negative. Like I said, basic mode, this is your sandbox. This is, in a perfect world, I'm able to max out all my KPIs, all of my metrics, and kind of see, you know, where does that land you budget-wise? How much money do you need to spend in order to max those out? And it'll be interesting for you to see, you know, I will when I've been creating portfolios, it's interesting to watch as the numbers change. Is this a good opportunity for me to start maybe having better communication and ask for more money? If I can start to see some trends, if I need to go over budget by $100,000 or $200,000, what's that going to get me? Is that going to move the needle enough for my executive decision makers to go ahead and do that for me? So again, that sandbox area where you can kind of go ahead and try to max out all of your metrics, all your KPIs, and see what that would be like. On the other side, your advanced mode, this is really going to help you try to get the best results in your real-world environment. This is where we start to try to take all of those needles and we try to put them as far into the good zone or that green zone as possible. This is where your budgets can't be exceeded here. But the cool thing is that you can actually start to go ahead and start to set some floors and ceilings. So I talked a little bit earlier about the DOTs. They've got performance goals that are mandated in order for them to get federal funds. And so if they know that they need to hit a specific goal, they can actually move that slider over, set that floor to ensure that that metric is always going to be within that range. Now, what that's going to do is now you're going to start seeing changes to all of your other dials and all your different metrics. Because you don't have unlimited funds, things are going to start to move around, and you'll be able to see those impacts right as you make them. So again, this is a really good, real-world test area for you to start looking at kind of all those impacts, see what those different scenarios look like, and then, once you're done with that and you actually get to a point where you're happy with all of your metrics and all the KPIs kind of where they stand, you can actually preview and export this new custom scenario directly back into Decision Lens for further analysis. And so Caitlin will go ahead and show that to you, but you can see things like your portfolio budget, how much you initially allocated versus that adjusted allocation now in this new scenario you're creating. What your different metric numbers are going to be, the final value, including some of that visual information like the threshold information. Here you can see we've got cost savings and projected revenue. Those are both in the green, so that's great. And then finally, you can see what's in and what's out, what funded alternatives are going to be in that portfolio and which ones aren't. And then you can start to take this information and then compare that back to some of the pre-built scenarios that you've already got inside of Decision Lens. So I'm going to pass it back over to Caitlin and let her walk you through both of those analysis modes.
Thanks, Michael. So we're going to jump back into Decision Lens and walk you through what those modes look like. So as Michael mentioned, the first mode is the basic mode, and this is what the dashboard is originally created in. And this mode is really the unconstrained mode. So I am allowed to exceed my initial starting budget. I don't have this limitation. And this is where you get to ask the questions of, if I need to hit a particular goal for a metric, how much might that cost me and ultimately put me over my initial starting budget? And so what that looks like, if we look at the example for this bottom portfolio, our infrastructure portfolio, we can see when we first created the dashboard, we are initially allocating $3.47 million, so about $3.5 million. What that's getting us is about $56 million in revenue, projected revenue, about $31.5 million in cost savings, but it's also giving us 61 vulnerabilities, which is probably not very good. And so now if I want to start performing these trade-offs, if I know for this portfolio I can actually only spend about $2.5 million, as I start to move this dial toward that lower allocation amount, you'll see that the metrics within the portfolio are directly impacted. So I'm getting less in revenue, I'm getting less in cost savings, but I'm also getting closer to that green area for vulnerabilities and decreasing the amount of vulnerabilities that I would have. Just as similar with the allocation sliders, we can do the same thing for our metric tiles. And so if you know for projected revenue, you have to hit a certain goal. Let's say you have to hit about 56 million. As I start to increase this dial to hit about that 56 million mark and get in that green area, you can see the other metrics in the portfolio are also impacted. So I'm also getting more in cost savings, but I'm getting, a greater amount of vulnerabilities. And ultimately, in getting me this performance goal, it's costing me more money. So I'm now spending over my initial allocation of that $3.5 million, and that's putting me over my initial starting budget by almost $500,000. And is that okay? So as Michael mentioned, this is really your sandbox and where you start to get asking those questions of, if I'm going to hit particular goals, do I have the money to spend to achieve those? And if not, I might need to start moving things around. So the other mode that we have is advanced mode. And the main difference between basic and advanced mode is in basic mode, again, we are operating in this unconstrained world. So we can exceed this starting budget. We can go into the red. That's okay. We're just seeing kind of what money we might need. When I flip into advanced mode, a couple things are happening. The first thing is that you are constraining your starting budget. So you're going to notice you have this lock here, and this is telling the optimizer that we cannot exceed this initial starting budget. We have to stay under this number. So you'll notice before I was in the red, I was over that amount, and just by switching into advanced mode, I'm switching into this smart optimizer run mode. So in basic mode, I was telling each portfolio what the allocation amount would be, what the metric values, what metric values I wanted to hit. And the difference in advanced mode is you're actually specifying what constraints you have. So putting in those real world constraints on your allocation and your performance targets, and the optimizer is then returning the best metric value that it can get you for each metric. And to show you what that looks like, so for, again, this portfolio, if I know I have to spend less money than what I have now, so let's go back down to that around 200 or 2.5 million mark. As I start to apply that constraint, you can see the metrics are also affected. So yes, I'm more so under my initial starting budget, but now again, I'm getting less in projected revenue, less in cost savings. I can do the same thing, so apply same constraints for the metric. So if I know I have to stay within a particular range for projected revenue, let's say I have to stay within 36 million to the 48 million range, that's fine. I can apply this constraint, and again, it's going to adjust the allocation for that portfolio. It's going to impact the other metrics that I have. And so the three major things that are happening in advanced mode are you're able to apply constraints on your portfolio allocation and your metric allocations. And then as you apply these constraints, the optimizer is going to return the best possible metric that it can for you. And it's also going to try to keep you as close to that green area that you've defined as good as it can. And as it's doing these things, it's also going to keep you under that initial starting budget. So again, this is where you really get to apply your real world constraints and kind of see what the best values that you can obtain from the optimizer. When you're in advanced mode, you can also use a detailed view, and this is really helpful to kind of see. I'm going to scroll down. So as I've applied this constraint, so I've applied this range, these are the budget points that I have told the optimizer, I would like to hit. And it's where it looks disabled, this is showing me, I'm telling the optimizer, I can't hit anywhere in here. It has to be above this line. And then similar to the constraint we applied to the allocation, as you apply these constraints, you're kind of seeing, based on the constraints in your budget, these are the budget points that you're going to be able to hit. So again, this detailed view makes it really easy to see the different budget points that are going to be available to you. So now that we have walked through the different modes of analysis for the dashboard, and we have kind of set up, we're okay with the amount of money we're allocating for each portfolio. We are happy with the final metrics that we have obtained for each of our metrics values. We're going to jump into that final view of preview scenarios. And you'll notice up in your right-hand corner, this is where you access this view. And this is that final summary view for each portfolio. So now that you've applied your constraints, you have made your adjustments for each portfolio and metric, this is what you're getting. So the summary is organized by portfolio, so you can see all of the information for each of the portfolios in my dashboard. And then the other thing that it's telling me is the budgeting information. So how much money did I initially allocate when I created this portfolio? So I can see I initially allocated about $6.5 million. And then since the adjustments I made in the dashboard, I'm now actually allocating more money to this particular portfolio. I'm allocating about $1 million more, and that might be okay because, again, as we made those adjustments, we might have been taking money from other portfolios. So you can see because we were operating in that advanced mode, I was able to move money around across portfolios. So the second part of the summary that you get here is the metric information. So now that you have set your thresholds and you know what metrics, what ranges are good or bad, you get to see for each metric what that final value is, and then if that's in the green, the yellow, or the red based on the thresholds that you applied. So again, you just get to see that final summary view for your metrics. The very last part of the portfolio information is the list of funded and unfunded alternatives. And this is really telling you which projects are getting me these performance metrics and ultimately what am I spending my money on. And so by default, we're going to show you the first 5. You can click to view the full list. And again, these are all of the projects that would be helping you achieve these performance targets and ultimately what you're spending your money on. So the very last part of the dashboard revolves around taking all of this information that we've just configured in the dashboard and actually exporting it and putting it back into the portfolios. And so what I mean by that is at the very top of our summary view, we have this option to export our scenarios. So if I wanted to create a new scenario, I could do that. And for each portfolio, it's going to take the list of funded projects as well as the amount of allocation and generate a new scenario with that information. And as Michael mentioned, this is where you get to put it back into Decision Lens, compare it with maybe other scenarios that you've already created to see how it stacks up. You can use the other visualizations that we have in Decision Lens and make future adjustments in the portfolio if you want. But this is just giving you the ability to take what you've configured within the dashboard and send it back to those portfolios to continue the analysis. And so that really concludes the summary view and the 2 modes of analysis for the dashboard. So Michael, I'm going to pass it back to you. I think you have a couple other things to go over.
Thanks, Caitlin. This is such a great solution for everybody to use to start having more open dialogue and better conversations internally. If you're being told that you have to hit a certain metric or a certain performance measure, that's great. But we all need to be able to talk about those hard trade-offs and sometimes the compromises that we have to make in the portfolios, in our investments, in order to hit those. And this is going to be a really great solution for all of you to be able to do that. The Impact Dashboard provides a great host of features that organizations, regardless of your industry, so whether you're a DOT looking at different project funding levels. If you're a pharmaceutical company looking at different therapeutic areas, being able to look at all of your portfolios in a single location and then determine the trade-offs needed to make sure that you're reaching all of your goals and ultimately making sure that it really is aligned with the strategic direction and your strategic initiatives is huge. Please, we want everybody to reach out to us, learn more about the Impact Dashboard. If you're a current customer, please reach out to your account manager to learn how you can access the Impact Dashboard. We've got a What's New page. You can go there and watch a few demo videos and learn a little bit more about everything that we talked about today. We've got those demo videos up on YouTube as well. You can also go to DLU if you're a customer and learn more and take some updated training materials and stuff about the Impact Dashboard and really get certified on that. Again, we're going to go ahead and send out the slides as well as the recording and a special link for everybody to really start being active on the community and really get a conversation going. Caitlin and I are very active there. We'll go ahead and answer as many of those questions as we have, but we also encourage everybody to communicate with each other. We want you guys to start learning from each other how you're implementing Decision Lens and using the solution and kind of best practices that you found within your organization, and so we highly encourage that. We've got a couple other events coming up. The first one, we've got another webcast coming up here at the end of the month. Is January 25th. It's with Joe Rafter. He's the CEO of Business Change Leadership. He's an expert in disruptive change and leadership breakthrough initiatives. In that webcast, he's really going to go ahead and explain what's needed and what's often missing for true transformational success. If you go to bit.ly/orgmuscle, you can register for that webcast and learn more. And then another in-person event that we've got coming up March 15th that we're really excited about. This is the second time that we're hosting the Building a Strategic Government Portfolio event. It's going to be live in Washington, D.C. on March 15th. We're going to have Decision Lens user presentations from folks like the FAA, U.S. Navy, DHS, and more. We're really excited about that. Again, it's the second year that we're doing this. We're really going to be kind of going over what are the requirements of rising resources and shrinking resources and how innovative agencies are really talking about strategic and tactical approaches to manage those complex performance portfolios. And again, you can go to bit.ly/stratgov to learn more about that. I want to thank everybody for joining us today to learn about the Impact Dashboard. This is something that we're really excited about, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.